I think we should bear in mind that most lawyers don't really care about the technology. They care about what the technology does for them. If you start off with the premise of the solution is delivering the quality I talk about, it's secure, it's not violating privacy, that has to be given. The critical thing from there is identifying how do your processes, your internal processes need to change. How do you actually educate and actually change the way in which you work? Part of our expert solution strategy is domain knowledge combined with technology to ultimately help our customers be more productive.
On today's Legally Speaking podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by Martin O'Malley. Martin is the CEO of Wolters Kluwer, Legal and Regulatory Division. He has more than 20 years of experience in operations, sales, customer support, product development, and marketing. Martin has led businesses across Europe, the US, Asia Pacific, and has extensive international experience. So, a very big warm welcome to the show, Martin.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. And before we dive into all the great work that you are doing, we do have a customary icebreaker question here on the Legally Speaking podcast, which is, on the scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being very real, what would you rate the hit TV series Suits in terms of its reality of the law, if you've seen it?
Yeah, I have to say I do confess to having seen some of the earlier episodes, but I'm not a lawyer by background, so I haven't really been looking at through that lens. But I asked my wife, and she said she would give Harvey a 9.
There we go. Well, that's very high praise for Harvey.
Very high praise for Harvey. His legal skills, of course.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's get back to you then, Martin, as we move swiftly on. Would you mind telling our listeners a bit about your background and career journey?
Yeah, so I grew up in the west of Ireland, so I've spent exactly half my life, I realised, in the west of Ireland, studied engineering, and I started my career at Relics, at the Elsevier piece of Relics. First in operations, but I've been very fortunate to kind of move through different functions in the company, so operations, product management, marketing and sales, through to unit leadership. And I started at that very interesting point, which was the whole print to digital migration. Seems like a long time ago. And in addition to the fact that I had multiple functions, I've also been very lucky that I started in Ireland, I worked in the UK, moved to Amsterdam, and from there I was sent to both Singapore and the US. So I've kind of that international exposure. I moved to Wolters Kluwer in 2017 and started out as the MD for the Benelux for Legal and Regulatory. In May of 2020, in the middle of COVID, I actually became the CEO, and I currently run the division. It's about 950 million euros turnover. We operate in multiple countries across Europe, the US, China, and India. And I was really drawn to it because of its purpose, Wolters Kluwer purpose, which is deep impact when it matters most. And it's this idea that we help our clients to be impactful, but also that we also indirectly have an impact in the societies we operate in. So that was a very powerful thing, and it still motivates me today.
Yeah, absolutely. And we love having those voices on the show that really are inspired to make a real impact. So just thinking back to James Thornton, who's one of the leading climate change legal professionals in the world, and some great conversations we've had. But congratulations on becoming the CEO. And I know you're doing some fantastic work from your side. Could you perhaps give us a bit of a day in the life of a CEO at Wolters Kluwer?
Yeah, I mean, it's, if you run a division at Wolters Kluwer, we kind of work on a certain cadence, and if you zoom out, it's like a 3-year plan, which gets translated into your yearly budget. And then it's basically, monthly reporting where you're kind of looking at it from an internal perspective. How's the business developing? But a big part of that is also looking at what we're doing with our customers. And Wolters Kluwer has this mission, which is focused on what we call basically transforming our business towards expert solutions, where we combine our expertise or domain knowledge of certain segments, in my case, legal and regulatory, so the legal professionals, with technology, with our content and data, to help our customers be more effective. So I would say in all of our internal meetings, there's always a kind of an element of what we're doing for customers. We spend a long time looking at things like net promoter scores, but also how that's translating into business results. So you're always kind of toggling between those two. And sandwiched between that, obviously, is focus on our employees. We have a very strong focus on culture. And culture is really, I translate that into how good do we feel as employees at Wolters Kluwer. So, we measure our engagement scores every year. because I have a very strong belief in happy employees translates into happy customers, and that's a kind of your financial results are an outcome of the two things you do for one for your employees and secondly for your customers. So they're outcomes rather than just an objective in itself.
And I love that. And I always say to people with my legal recruiting hat on, don't just hire people for a job, get people to really buy into the mission and feel they contribute to the mission and they have a real purpose as part of that, rather than just coming to do 9 to 5 every day and just have a job. And obviously you're doing a great job of that. Now, you didn't think we could get away with this podcast without talking about that little thing called AI, did you, Martin?
Yeah.
So, we've got listeners of all sorts of levels of AI, some very, very, very highly advanced, some obviously just dipping their toe in, and some curious. So let's start at sort of the simple level to begin with. What's your definition of Gen AI? And with obviously a number of months since its arrival, what's the current state of adoption for the legal market for 2025 in your view?
Yeah, I think there's probably a few different pieces to that. So let's maybe break it out. I think Gen AI obviously has had a huge impact in a relatively short period of time of just kind of getting the general interest in AI. If I sit at the table with my kids, I talk about AI to the point of where they say it's boring. But I think if you kind of zoom out and you look at AI from a Wolters Kluwer perspective, we've been deploying AI for multiple years before Gen AI came along, and we've got multiple solutions in the market that actually uses AI. I think about 50% of our revenue have some AI built in. But for us, the driver has been really when we look at AI, we look at how can it help demonstrably impact customers. And there are principles we apply there which are really focused on delivering the highest level of accuracy for our customers, where we're taking, I think, three things we look at. One is how we combine human expertise and validated content with AI capabilities to ensure that you can deliver something that's of a high quality level, and quality translates into it does what customers expect, but it also operates in a secure and private manner. I think those are things that are important for us as a company, but also for our customers. And at the same time, provides the transparency to our clients that the results they see they can trace them and that they're validated. So I think that's a very important piece. Now, if you look at where we are today in that journey, there is huge interest. I just come back from a trip from China last week where I met law firms, I was talking to corporate lawyers, but also at government level. And the conversations I was having there were same conversations I have in the Netherlands or in any of the markets we operate in. And they typically hinge around things like, what can AI do to help improve my productivity? How can I do it in a safe way? How can I be assured that quality is confirmed? And I think they're looking to parties like Wolters Kluwer to actually deliver on that. So it's a very exciting time because it's not just about the technology. AI at the end of the day is just a technology, whether it's Gen AI or other forms of technology. They are only a means to an end. And the end is, I think, for our customers is how can we help the customers be more productive? So I think that is really the key focus. And that's where, frankly, the way we look at it across our business, it's part of our expert solution strategy, which is domain knowledge combined with technology to ultimately help our customers be more productive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another big part, and from the conversations we've been having on the show, is obviously AI coupled with PI, the people intelligence as well. You can go out and buy all these amazing pieces of technology, but without getting the people on board and educated and seeing the value. I guess you talk very clearly there about the benefits to the customers. Is there one that you see time and time again? Because let's be real. Wolters Kluwer has been at the forefront of integrating AI for a long time. It's only really been sort of table stakes in the last couple of years or so in terms of the mainstream, but from over the years of sort of customers responding to you regarding Gen AI, is there sort of a core key theme benefit for those that might be less like at that stage at the moment in terms of thinking about buying that you'd really want to kind of hammer home?
Yeah, I think there's the way we think about this is if you kind of take a step back and you look at it from the customer's perspective and the bigger trends, and particularly for legal professions, but I think if you take all the professions that we serve as Wolters Kluwer, some of the same principles apply. For legal and regulatory professionals, whether you're a corporate lawyer or whether you're in a law firm or working frankly in the legal profession for government, you have an increasing volume of regulatory requirements that they have to comply with in a decreasing amount of time. So what our customers are looking for really are solutions that help them actually be more productive, but do that in a way that safeguards quality. And we look at it in a number of ways. So if you look at my portfolio, the products we serve, broadly speaking, about 70% of the business is digital content, so research content, 30% is software. So when we look at the research content, it's really looking at how can we help improve the discoverability for our clients. So, typically a corporate lawyer is looking at a law firm lawyer is looking at precedent. Corporate lawyer might be looking at, what regulatory changes are, how do they affect my business? And but essentially what they're doing is they're doing document search. They want to find a specific piece of information. Sometimes they know in advance what they're looking for. They just want to get it confirmed. And what we're doing there essentially is, we're implementing AI in a way that helps them get more effectively to do those documents. It sometimes be a conversational search instead of keyword search. You're looking at summarization capabilities. You're looking in some cases where translation services are being built in. That's obviously very easy with Gen AI. But the key focus is on helping them get more quickly to the relevant information. That's one use case. The other use case that we see, and there are multiple, by the way, so I'm just going to pick a couple of examples. But if you look at, for example, in Legisway, which is our contract lifecycle management product, there we've been using AI, not Gen AI, by the way, that's more, I would say, traditional AI, to search through contracts and extract relevant details from contracts. So, I mentioned I started in the COVID period. What was one of the most sought after software questions at that period was, I've got leases in my buildings. When are those leases up for renewal? So that I can make sure at the time I have a renewal if I'm going to shrink my amount of office space because I'm now going to hybrid working. So that type of that's high value information at that point in terms of, major corporations that have lots of different locations. How do you get very quickly to where you have opportunities to potentially save costs and actually have a business impact? So that's, I would say, examples on the software and the content side. But the other area that we see at the moment as being very exciting is where you have, on one hand, research products, like our content products, where it's coming more closer to the workspace of the client. And, we call that the legal workspace, where you're looking at internal information, sometimes client-specific information, or the clients of the client information. And increasingly, our customers are looking to us saying, okay, I'm working with third parties. It might be a Harvey, it might be an Agora, it might be Microsoft. How can we take what you bring to the table, bring it closer to internal information? And that's creating some new use cases. And I think the focus there again is on efficiency. So, document creation, due diligence reviews, data analysis, and at the same time, where sometimes they're pivoting between, let's say, task-related work internally, but also using external sources. And I think that's where you're going to see a lot of developments over time. But despite the huge interest, what we see is that the pace is going to be very measured. So we try to in a way reflect the cautiousness of our clients in adapting AI and technology in general to the speed at which we bring it to them. So I think that's a continuous effort in calibration.
Yeah, and I love that word collaboration. My listeners will be fed up of me saying it, but collaboration is domination. And I love that you talk to efficiency as well. And I think it's an important lesson for anyone when you're thinking of rolling out products and keeping your customers at mind. There tends to be three factors: time, quality, or cost, where they'll look to buy or see the value. And you articulated that brilliantly there in terms of those efficiency gains, which is clearly going to free up a lot of time from other tasks. Let's go back to, I think it was about September 2024, where Wolters Kluwer has introduced a new Gen AI functionality called Vital Law. So I think this is the company's legal research platform. So again, This combines the power of innovation with Wolters Kluwer's in-depth expertise across 15 practice areas. That's quite a few. So could you tell us a little bit more about Vital Law AI?
Yeah, I think Vital Law AI is probably the first of our research-related AI options we brought to the market. In the meantime, we've brought it into, frankly, all of our other content products, and if it's not in it, it's coming in the next couple of months. And it's just an example of what I'm mentioning about where essentially making the way in which lawyers in the US search vital law a lot easier. So as you said, you've got 50 different domain areas, um, multiple documents. I think what's often forgotten with a company like Wolters Kluwer, it's not that we have just the authenticated content, but we have authenticated content that goes back years and years. So, in some of our databases, we have up to 200 million records, just to kind of give an example. So what you're doing really, what we've done with Vital AI is essentially deployed AI in a way where you can more quickly extract relevant information. You may get a list of results coming back from the product, which AI then actually summarizes, it extracts. I mean, you can basically manipulate it in a way where ultimately it's getting you faster to the relevant piece of information. It's not more complex than that. And I think that's what often is seen. But it's highly valuable for clients because it translates into time reduction. Plus, and I think that's the other thing that is, I would say, differentiates us, is it has to deliver a result that's reliable. So that the answer that the customer gets has to have a high quality, and it needs to be secure and comply with privacy regulations and so forth. So we have been very measured in deploying AI into our solutions. Quality has been for us more important than speed, which is kind of interesting in a market where you see a lot of new players coming in, you see press releases go left, right, and center in terms of all this exciting stuff. You ask them what does my day look like as a CEO? It's sometimes providing that perspective of guys, we don't respond to press releases, but we need to keep focused on does the solutions we deliver to our customers actually ultimately have an impact? And if there is an impact, that will translate into, your better sales, better retention levels, upsells. And I think that's where the focus has been. And what Vital, as I said, was the first product we rolled out on the research side, but we've taken those learnings now and we're deploying them across the rest of our research products across Europe and China.
And I love that you talk to quality. And again, our listeners probably a little bit bored of me saying this, but I always talk about Jeff Bezos delivering a really interesting piece of insight in terms of, in a world of constant change and new things and people being fast out, you need to think about your clients' expectations that won't change. What are the things that won't change? And in his world, he couldn't imagine an Amazon where people want to pay more for their products and get them slower. So he's understanding that his clients' behaviors are they're going to continuously want to get their products faster. They're going to continuously want to get them at a lower rate cost point. And so focusing on the things that won't change in that quality aspect, like you say, not just necessarily getting something out because of some breaking news, and sticking to your North Star and your mission is what's going to separate you apart. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's critical. And I think the other thing that we see is that it's not just about actually taking the solution to customers. You also have to help them work with it. And one of the things that I think is underestimated always with technology advancements is it's not just about the technology. There's a change in how people need to work that has to happen as well. And so a big part of what we do as when we bring new solutions to the market, not just AI, is to help our customers actually work with them. So I think that focus on guiding them through the change, but also changing their behavior, that's critical. Because ultimately, you can make a great selection in terms of the technology investment, but if it's not used, it's not doing what it should do. And I heard a shocking statistic recently, which is that 50% of law firms, corporate lawyers, are investing to some extent at the moment in AI, but only 20% of it is being used effectively. And there's a huge potential there. And I've heard this time and time again. Also, I heard last week from clients that, you look at you sit at the table with the managing partners and they're all excited about AI. And then they take you for a tour around the premises and you see lawyers sitting between piles of paper. So I think that's, and I don't say that in a way to mock lawyers, absolutely not the case. They're my customers. But I think it just reflects that there's still a gap between where the aspirations are and where the practice is. And that's going to take some time to change. And that's a human behavior. I mean, it's like, we all search, with keywords in Google because we've been kind of doing that for the last 20 years. But I'm finding if I look at myself just as a user outside of work, I use ChatGPT because I take a picture and I say, okay, I'm having a problem with the watering system in my garden. And it's much more effective at helping me than Google. But I have to train myself to make that step every time. And I think it's the same in law firms. It's even more complex of corporate lawyers because you have boundaries around practice, expertise. So people are kind of a little bit territorial about their expertise. So I think there's a big element of knowledge management and change management here that's been underestimated when people think about how AI is going to change the world.
Absolutely. And I feel like, a lot of what you said there is, I'm just sitting here nodding, and I also just remember you saying taking a photo. I remember our washing machine at home had an E39 error or something flashing, and I took a photo of it and then just went straight to ChatGPT, explained this to me, and it was a simple blockage. You open the thing, you take it out, and you actually get the solution. So thanks for that. And you touched on, I know we talk a lot about this when it comes to adoption of Gen AI. So I perhaps want to talk about some of the less obvious ones. People and getting them to change. And if you want to share anything, that feel free. But explain to our listeners the challenges, but also opportunities when it comes to the adoption of Gen AI. And if you do talk to it on the people side, any things you would say that you've learned that's worked well to get people to understand and actually adopt Gen AI.
Yeah. So I think if you start off with the premise of, the solution is delivering the quality I talk about, it's secure, it's not violating privacy, that has to be given. That's the basics. But I think the critical thing from there is identifying how do your your internal processes need to change. How do you actually educate and actually change the way in which you work? And I've seen this countless times also when we implemented systems within Wolters Kluwer. You adapt to Salesforce.com or Workday. Unless you make it the way you work, you say, okay, all of your HR processes of how I'm now going to actually put a request in to open a new position. You cannot just email your HR person and say, okay, I want to hire somebody. No, you have to actually go into Workday, open the position, and kind of make that the way in which you work. And I think that is a big barrier for legal professionals because they have to make that step. So, but I think that's partly educated in them as well. And I think it's also, focusing on what is the impact for them. Whether the impact is time saving, what the impact is, you're going to get more quickly to a high quality recommendation for your client. You're going to get your memos out faster. You're going to do that in a way which frankly focuses you, gets some of this productivity gain that we're trying to seek, but not just, measuring efficiency only is one thing, but I think also that they're working more effectively. So I think it's also showing by doing, as it were. And I think that's where that support of, helping them kind of get it working is critical. It doesn't end with the customer taking the solution. It ends with, frankly, I always say, we're a business that's focused on renewals. We want to sell products. We start a relationship with a customer when we sell something. That's a relationship that we want to continue. The renewal starts with the sale. And everything between the sale and the renewal is what you do to support the customer so that the next time around when they come back, they're going to say, okay, I'm getting so much value from your solution that I want to continue it. And frankly, I want to expand my users. So there's a very logical fit between the business objective and the client objective of, you're helping your customer be successful because if you help your customer be successful, you're also being successful as a business. So it ties back to what I was saying earlier on about the, net promoter scores. We use those continuously to measure, is it hitting the mark? Because that's ultimately where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah, and you obviously inevitably increase your customer lifetime value with that approach as well.
Absolutely. That's the key.
Yeah, and people don't think about that when it's so hard to get a new customer that so doing that work to get them in, you want to extract that lifetime value, and then those customers become your instant referrers, your fans, your super fans, if you like, and actually going out there championing your product and big advocates for your product, and then the new business floods in from there. So yeah, again, just really smart, really encouraging for other CEOs, business leaders, entrepreneurs, lawyers thinking about business like that, really getting deep into understanding the relationships and offering value throughout that time, you're going to increase that customer lifetime value tremendously. Okay, a bit of a tongue-in-cheek question here, but will Gen I bring fundamental or incremental changes? Tell us your thoughts.
I think it can bring fundamental changes, but it'll bring them in incremental steps. And I think that's mainly because of the nature of how legal professionals operate. I think that cautiousness that sits in their nature, I think they're, I would say, exceedingly deliberate and thoughtful to Gen AI implementations. And I think you have to take them on that journey in steps, but keeping very much focused on ultimately, the long game, which is helping them be more effective. And I think it's not just a measure of business effectiveness. It's also, I mean, if you look at the quality of life, the work-life balance, I think there are still a lot of gains to be made there. And that I would say applies both to the corporate lawyers as well as law firms. They have that same struggle. So I think it'll take time.
Today's episode is brought to you by Clio, leaders in legal tech and the team behind one of the most exciting AI launches this summer. Clio Duo is arriving this summer and it's already creating a stir. Built right into Clio Manage, Duo uses AI to help you draft emails, capture time, summarize documents automatically. It's smart, seamless, and designed to save you hours every week. Find out more and see what Clio Duo can do for your firm at clio.com/UK. Now back to the show. It'll take time. And I was reading the article just the other week about Bill Gates predicting a 2-day working week with the advent of AI. Who knows whether that will become a thing or not?
Yeah, that's a whole other discussion. But I do think that the firms that are now kind of embracing and starting to kind of put their toes in the water and test and learn, those will be the ones that are best positioned to actually really adapt it if it becomes like a matter of best practice. So I think that's where I worry most about firms where they're kind of saying, well, this is not our beer. I think it has to be your beer in some shape or other. And that measured approach and kind of engaging is the best way to work with it. But what I also see is that interest is also very uneven within firms. So you can have, I guess you'll always have the leaders, you'll have the laggards, but it's also about getting the champions within firms who kind of have that disposition and have an interest in technology versus the partners who will say, okay, technology to me is a little bit of technology, and because I think we should bear in mind that most lawyers don't really care about the technology; they care about what the technology does for them. And that we shouldn't lose sight of that. It's ultimately a means to an end.
And it will become more understood. It will become more day to day. You just think back to dial-up internet. We still used it. It was slower. It wasn't complete. It wasn't brilliant. Then obviously fiber and everything else, an evolution. I think I try and encourage people to almost think the other way, that it's almost being lazy now if you're not adopting AI. You're not thinking about how we can be as efficient and how we can enhance our client experience and be as client-centered as possible. Because if you're staying in a lane which has always been on and other people are going there, to your point, you don't necessarily need to be the first out the gate with something and it not be of a quality, but you need to be reimagining, rethinking. We're going through not just an industrial revolution. We've had Piers Linney on the show, who's a former Dragon's Den investor and lawyer, talk very openly and said knowledge-based work will go to zero whether lawyers like it or not. You need to think of the value pyramid with technology coming in. Where does your human touch come in? Where does your value happen? Because this isn't once in a revolution. This is a once in a species time opportunity. So I love again that you talk to the importance of being curious, but also thinking of things through methodically and ensuring that you put your client first. I think that's such a key message throughout this podcast. For anyone thinking of launching anything, really do put yourself in the seat of how your client sees it, because then you'll deliver more value and more trust. So let's stick with some of the benefits and risks then. You've talked to it a little bit, but let's go a bit deeper in terms of some of the key benefits, but also potential risks associated with the adoption of Gen AI with the legal field. I guess putting a shoe on the other foot, I'm saying go for it, but then there's obviously, let's say they've gone for it. What are some of the potential risks, and then how can people go about mitigating the trust in regards to the importance of trusted content or things that are put out there?
Yeah, so I think the risks are if you look at the quality aspects, the risks are that young lawyers will actually take for granted that the quality that the models that what it delivers them actually is actually quality. And I think that's an education. It's not just education. It's also about how you set it up in a way where, so we are, when I look from a more pure perspective at our content, we are very careful about how we put our content into models from a training perspective. So we work with RAG, we work with APIs, so we're currently experimenting with a couple of third parties to look at how can we bring our content in a safe way. Safe from our perspective so that your IP doesn't get sucked up into somebody else's large language model, but safe from the customer perspective that the answers they're getting are quality assured. I think that the risk is that younger lawyers will actually take what they get from models, whether it's ChatGPT or whatever it is, DeepSeek. They'll take it as being valid. The interesting thing on that, and this is a risk I hadn't really thought about until I talked to clients about it last week, which was, someone said, well, all these young lawyers, by going through this grunt work of having to, review documents and research, they learn. So if this work is now being done for them, it's being replaced by AI, and even if it's safe AI, how do they learn? And I thought that's interesting because that's a question that is something that they're going to think of a change process of the learning that lawyers get as they go through, university. How does that translate into their first jobs in law firms or corporate law? So I think that's kind of a new dimension I hadn't thought about. But again, it comes back to the change management point I was making early on. But the other one, I would say, and it's risk and opportunity combined. What I see at the moment is huge interest in what has been, I would say, a holy grail in information for a long time, which is how do you take this mass of information or knowledge that's sitting within companies and extract it in a way where it's creating more value for the customer and combine it with other sources of information, whether it's sitting in SharePoint, whether it's sitting in people's emails boxes. This is something that a use case that, when I was working with research and development in pharma already back in 2010, then we're trying to kind of do that as well, saying you've got massive information and literature, you have previously research work that was done internally within a pharma company. Can we, with federated search or data warehouses, kind of bring all this information together and avoid that you end up recreating the wheel? And I think the opportunity now with GenAI is to bring that closer together. But I would say again, you then get into the I would say customization hell of how do you make it work for customers at scale, where it works, it's repeatable, and the same quality principles apply. So, I'm not sure if that's helpful or not, but I think that there's just a new dynamic there that I think we're still kind of figuring through, whether it's risk or opportunity, and sometimes it can be risk and opportunity.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of the time, actually, it is. And it's a very, very, very fine line. I think it also takes a certain personality type that's got an appetite for risk to also think about these things as well. And to your point, I delivered a keynote earlier this year for the LawDroid AI conference and spoke very openly to that point that your client mentioned about, well, the traditional lawyer job is going to change. It categorically has to change. Fundamentally, we need to rethink what this new workforce of lawyers look like and what are the skills that are going to be absolutely fundamentally needed once, the technology is given that is safe and, sensible to use and et cetera, et cetera. Where do we move to that point of the pyramid up the value curve in terms of that human interaction? Where is that going to be most valuable to the client so they are fit for purpose for the client? So again, thanks for sharing that. I almost don't like asking this question because it is so hard to predict, but you're super knowledgeable, you're in the trade, so you're going to have a view. So what do you think the future of Gen AI might look like? What developments do you think we can expect to see over the course of this year and the coming years? And you won't be held to it.
So I think that it continues to enrich existing solutions as a given. I think that journey And I think if you think about that, um, that ball is already rolling and it's built on some empirical knowledge before Gen AI, because I think that's one of the dangers is that people think about just Gen AI as a window. It's not. It is a window, but it's a window in the evolution of AI as a whole. So I think that's important to kind of keep that perspective. Um, I think the most interesting thing will be how it's actually going to change how people work, and um, and that will, as we talked about, I think it's going to take some time, but I think it's inevitable that that will happen. And if I look at our business, so we've got 20,000 employees globally. We also look at what does this mean for our business internally. We're looking at what we're seeing. We can do our marketing and our marketing more efficiently. How we deal with our content, how we deal with huge volumes of content. Can we do that in a way where you can, improve quality, get things faster into the hands of your customers? We're looking at how we develop. A huge chunk of our employees, probably about 600 of the 6,000 of our employees plus are technologists. So the opportunities to improve how you do your programming, your development, where you can get stuff to the market faster. So I think the potential is hugely exciting, but it will take time, and that's a little bit that's going to be, I think, the mantra, and keeping our eyes on the ball of quality is going to be critical in that whole process.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that the quality piece is so important, particularly with so many new entrants and products and, almost everything coming out there that will rise to the top.
I think the new entrants one is interesting because if you look at the right now, I think there's the last number of years there's been a lot of investment in legal tech. Some of it I think will I question how well it's actually going to return if I was the investor. But I think it is. I think it's kind of symbolic of the amount of change that's happening at the moment and the appetite for change. And our experience is that new players create a new dynamic, so it's going to influence the ecosystem where players like Wolters Kluwer operate, but also the Microsofts and some of the newer players. But overall, we're always, I'd say, a company that's open to that because what we learn from the new players is often, frankly, they augment what we do. And sometimes they augment it to a point where we say, okay, we want them to be part of our stable, so we bring them on board. So I think that makes for a very interesting dynamic at the moment. And this whole area of the legal workspace is something that I think is something that we're going to see a lot of interesting development over the coming years.
And you gave a really good point there, actually. I always say to a lot of people, if you're going to go and disrupt the market, get yourself noisy enough so the big players start paying attention, because then there'll be the interesting conversations that you might want to have. Like you said, that could lead to an acquisition, a merger, or something else.
Or a collaboration. I mean, sometimes it's down to a collaboration. So I think that makes for an interesting dynamic. And I think, we live in interesting times.
We do, and I guess there's a two-part, sort of final question before we close. You're the CEO of a super interesting business that's doing some cutting-edge work in and around the world of legal and regulatory. What's one skill as a CEO of Wolters Kluwer that you would never want to lose from your toolbox, given that we are in a more tech-enabled workplace? And as a follow-up of that, what are you most excited about looking forwards as the CEO?
For me, it has to be a growth mindset. I always say to my managers and across the company, becoming a great manager is not like baking a cake. You're never done as a manager. And I consider myself, I'm a divisional CEO, leader, but at the same time, it doesn't exclude me from needing to continuously learn. So, an example of this is we had our executive team with Nancy, my boss, our CEO, in New York a couple of weeks back, and we spent 2 hours talking about agentic AI and thinking about how agentic AI may actually affect what we do, how it may affect our clients. And it's an example of there's just so much new stuff that you have to keep on top of. that if you don't have that growth mindset, at a certain point you're going backwards. And I think the same applies to our clients as well. But sometimes it's about embracing the change. So it's okay not to know everything, but you have to have the mindset of, I want to understand it. I want to know enough. I will never be an expert on agentic AI, believe me, but I know enough to understand it and think about what are the questions I need to be asking, one, my customers, but also my team in terms of how is this going to change how our customers operate? What does that mean for how we need to operate, and how do we actually kind of embrace that?
Yeah, no, and I love that. And I always say, the comfort zone is great, but nothing ever grows there. And having that growth mindset is so important. And look, it's clear, and that's obviously why Wolters Kluwer is doing fantastically well. With you, obviously, as the CEO, it's amazing the work that you've been doing, and that's why we're super excited to have the conversation today. So before we let you go, what would be your piece of advice for those wanting to learn more about Gen AI?
Just work with it. I mean, that's the thing that I'm often surprised with. I have conversations, sometimes it's dinner table conversations, and people talk about AI, and you get all these, it's going to end the world too, it's not going to have any impacts. When I ask the question, do people have the app on their phone? Do they have one of the apps on the table? I'm still surprised when people say, well, not yet. And my advice is, go and play with it, see what it does, experiment. It doesn't have to be in a work context. Actually, sometimes it's better not to use it in a work context because it just lowers the threshold. But I think that is the key thing, get comfortable with it and don't kind of step away from it. If you don't embrace it and play with it, you're not going to learn about it.
Yeah, lean into it. Absolutely. Listen, I've really, really enjoyed today, Martin. It's been wonderful learning more about your journey and indeed the work that you're doing, and super impressive work that everyone's doing at Wolters Kluwer. And if people want to learn more about your career or indeed Wolters Kluwer, where can they go to find out more? Feel free to share any websites, any social media handles. We'll also share them with this special episode for you too.
LinkedIn. They'll find me on LinkedIn, and happy to connect.
Easy as that. Well, this leads me to say thank you so much once again, Martin. It's been an absolute pleasure having this discussion. From all of us on the Legally Speaking podcast, sponsored by Clio, wishing you lots of continued success with your career and indeed the work you're doing at Wolters Kluwer. But for now, over and out. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you like the content here, why not check out our world-leading content and collaboration hub, the Legally Speaking Club, over on Discord. Go to our website, www.legallyspeakingpodcast.com, for the link to join our community there. Over and out.